Hello friends. Welcome to English Story Channel. Here, you can listen to simple English stories and improve your English listening skills. If you like my videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps me make more stories and grow this channel. Thank you for being part of English Story Channel. Let's learn English together. An interesting story. Twins. Part 1. New Beginnings. Sophie and Sarah Miller were twin sisters from California. They looked exactly the same brown eyes, same smile, same long hair. But they were very different inside. Sophie liked quiet mornings, books, and tea. Sarah liked music, sports, and coffee. People often said, "You are so lucky to have a twin." The sisters smiled, but sometimes it was not easy being one of two. They grew up in a small town near San Diego. Their parents owned a small bakery. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread filled the house. Sophie helped her mom decorate cakes, and Sarah helped her dad deliver bread to the local stores. Life was simple, but full of laughter. When the girls turned 18, they decided to go to college in Los Angeles. They would study at the same university but in different programs. Sophie chose computer science. Sarah wanted to study journalism. "You'll be coding all day," Sarah said with a smile. "And you'll be talking all day," Sophie replied. They both laughed and packed their bags. Their first week in the city was exciting and confusing. The campus was huge, full of students from all over the world. On the first day, a boy waved at Sophie and said, "Hey, Sarah. How was the concert?" Sophie blinked. What concert?" The boy looked confused. "Weren't you there last night?" Sophie smiled politely. "Sorry, you must mean my sister." Later that day, Sarah entered the cafeteria and the same boy waved again. "You forgot about our conversation this morning." Sarah laughed. "No, that wasn't me. That was Sophie." The boy's face turned red. "Oh no, twins," he said, and they both laughed. In the evenings, the sisters shared a small apartment near campus. They cooked together, told stories, and sometimes argued about small things, like who used all the milk or who forgot to do the laundry. But no matter what, they always ended the day watching old movies together. One Saturday, Sarah convinced Sophie to go hiking. "It will be good for you," she said. Sophie wasn't sure, but she agreed. The weather was sunny, and the hills were green. Halfway up the trail, they met an old man with a big camera. "Twins?" he asked with a smile. "Yes," Sarah answered proudly. The man took their photo and said, "I'm a retired photographer. You two look like you belong in a magazine." The sisters laughed, thanked him, and continued walking. At the top of the hill, they could see all of Los Angeles, the tall buildings, the ocean far away, and the tiny cars below. "It feels like we're starting a new life," Sophie said quietly. "We are," Sarah replied. "And it's going to be great." Over the next few weeks, they began to make new friends. Sophie joined the tech club and started building a small app that helped students find study partners. Sarah joined the student newspaper and began writing short articles. Sometimes, Sophie helped her edit them. Sometimes, Sarah tested her app. They were proud of each other. One afternoon, something funny happened. Sarah's professor stopped Sophie in the hallway. "Sarah, great job on your article about the art exhibition." Sophie froze for a second, then smiled. "Thank you, Professor," she said quickly and walked away. That evening, she told Sarah what happened. Sarah couldn't stop laughing. "Next time," she said, "just sign my name and take the grade." Life in Los Angeles was full of little surprises. They discovered a coffee shop that served the best blueberry muffins. They made friends with their neighbor, a kind old lady named Mrs. Turner, who always called them the double sunshine. One night, the sisters helped her fix her TV. She gave them homemade cookies as a thank you gift. But not every day was easy. There were exams, deadlines, and moments of homesickness. Sophie missed the quiet mornings in their hometown. Sarah missed their parents' bakery and the smell of fresh bread. Sometimes they sat on the balcony at night, looking at the city lights, talking about their childhood and their dreams. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Sarah said, "Do you ever think about the future?" Sophie nodded. "All the time. I want to build something that helps people. Maybe an app for families, something useful." Sarah smiled. "And I want to tell real stories. Maybe I'll write about people like us, ordinary but special." They watched the sky turn orange and pink. "Promise me," Sarah said softly, "that no matter what happens, we'll always stay close." Sophie smiled. "Promise." As the first stars appeared, a light breeze passed through the balcony. Somewhere in the city, music played softly. It felt like the beginning of something big, something that would change their lives forever. Part 2. Unexpected turns. A few weeks after classes started, Sophie and Sarah began to understand how different life in Los Angeles could be. They were learning new things, meeting new people, and discovering that being twins in a big city was sometimes confusing, and sometimes very funny. One Monday morning, Sophie was walking to her computer science class. She carried a backpack full of notebooks and a small laptop. Suddenly, a girl ran up to her. "Hi, Emma. I really liked your presentation yesterday." Sophie froze. "Oh, I think you mean my sister, Sarah," she said politely. The girl laughed. "Oh no, you look exactly the same." Sophie smiled and explained quickly. The girl thanked her, still a little embarrassed, and ran to her own class. Sophie walked on, shaking her head and laughing to herself. At the same time, Sarah was entering the campus cafeteria. A young man waved at her and shouted, "Hey, Sophie. Can I borrow your notes?" Sarah blinked. You want my notes?" The young man looked confused. "I thought you were Sophie. You're twins?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, we are. But my sister is the computer person, not me." The man laughed and apologized. Sarah walked away smiling, thinking how funny it was to have a sister who looked exactly like her. Later that week, the sisters decided to visit a local museum. They loved art and history. When they arrived, Sarah noticed a man with a camera taking pictures of visitors. He smiled at her and asked, "Did you help with the school project last year?" Sarah shook her head. "No, that must be my sister." He looked surprised but then laughed. Sophie arrived a few minutes later, and the man realized his mistake. They all laughed together and took a photo. Even small things became confusing. One morning, Sophie went to the campus bookstore. A clerk smiled at her and said, "Hi, Sarah. Did you try the new coffee shop near the library?" Sophie smiled politely. "No, I think you mean my sister." Later that afternoon, Sarah went to the same store. The clerk waved again. "You did go, didn't you?" Sarah laughed. "Yes. And it was very good." The sisters found this mix-up funny, and sometimes they played small tricks with people who confused them. One weekend, they went to a small festival in the city. Sophie wanted to see the science exhibits, and Sarah wanted to see live music. They agreed to split up and meet at noon. On the way, Sophie stopped at a food stall to buy a lemonade. The vendor smiled and said, "Are you the twin who baked cupcakes last month?" Sophie laughed. "No, that was my sister." When Sarah arrived later, the same vendor waved. "You must be the other twin." Sarah smiled and nodded. They shared lemonade and laughed about their day. Not everything was only fun. Sometimes people expected one sister to know things about the other. One day, Sarah's professor stopped Sophie in the hallway. "Sarah, can you explain the experiment from yesterday?" Sophie laughed nervously. I'm Sophie, not Sarah. The professor looked embarrassed and apologized. It's confusing because you look the same. Sophie smiled. At home, the sisters liked to talk about all the little mistakes and funny moments. I think people think we are magic, Sarah said, laughing. Yes, Sophie replied. Or maybe a little trouble. They would cook dinner together, talk about their day, and plan new adventures. One evening, while walking back from a bookstore, they found an old postcard on the sidewalk. It showed a picture of their town from many years ago. Look, Sarah said, someone dropped this. It's like a small piece of history. They decided to take it home. The postcard reminded them of the stories their parents told about California, and they felt connected to their past and each other. That week, they discovered something new about being twins. They could support each other in unexpected ways. Sophie helped Sarah with her journalism assignments. Sarah helped Sophie with her coding projects. Even when professors or classmates confused them, they found humor and strength in their connection. By the end of the week, they were walking on campus together. A light breeze moved their hair, and the sun was warm. You know, Sarah said, being twins is strange, but I love it. We're different, yet the same. Sophie nodded. Yes. And life is full of surprises. Sometimes funny, sometimes confusing, but always better together. And so, the sisters continued their first month at college. Every day brought small adventures, laughter, and new friendships. From mistaken identities to found postcards, they learned that life was unpredictable, but with each other, it was also full of joy. Part 3. Surprises everywhere. It was early autumn in Los Angeles. Sophie and Sarah were now comfortable at university. They had new friends, favorite cafes, and a daily routine. But the city was full of surprises, and being twins made life even more interesting. One Wednesday morning, Sophie went to the library to study. She carried her laptop and some notebooks. As she walked through the door, a young man waved at her. Hi, Sarah, can you help me with the project? Sophie blinked. I think you mean my sister, she said politely. The man looked confused. Twins? He asked. Sophie nodded. He laughed nervously and walked away. Later that day, Sarah met the same man in the campus cafeteria. Oh, I'm sorry, Sophie, he said. Sarah laughed. It's okay. We look the same. That's the fun of having a twin. The sisters were used to these small mistakes, but sometimes the mix-ups were bigger. One Saturday, Sarah was invited to a student art show. She wore a blue dress and carried her camera. Sophie went to the same place a little later to see a poster for a coding workshop. A man approached Sophie and said, "Wow, you look amazing. I remember you from last week at the art show." Sophie smiled and explained that it was actually Sarah. The man laughed and apologized. When Sophie later met Sarah outside, they both laughed about the confusion. People really do not know who is who, Sarah said. That evening, Sophie and Sarah decided to visit a small antique shop near campus. The shop smelled of old wood and paper. Sarah picked up an old notebook. Look at this, she said. It has letters from the 1970s. Sophie opened it and found notes about a student club that no longer existed. One letter mentioned two sisters who were very close but often played tricks on people. It sounds a little like us, Sophie said, laughing. They bought the notebook to read more at home. The next day, something surprising happened. Sophie went to the coffee shop near campus. A barista waved at her. Hi, Sarah, you always order a latte with cinnamon. Sophie smiled. Actually, I'm Sophie. The barista looked embarrassed. Oh no, I'm sorry. You two really confuse me. Sophie laughed and ordered her usual drink. When Sarah came in later, the barista waved again. Now I know who is who, she said. The sisters laughed together. Sometimes the mix-ups were fun. One afternoon, they went to a music festival. Sarah wanted to take photos of the bands. Sophie wanted to see the science exhibition near the festival. While walking through the festival, a man approached Sophie and asked, "Hey Sarah, can you take a photo of me and my friend?" Sophie smiled. "I think you mean my sister." The man laughed and said, "Wow, you really are twins." Sophie took the photo, then sent it to Sarah. Later, Sarah posted it online, and their friends commented, "You look exactly the same." Life also had quiet and thoughtful moments. One evening, the sisters returned home and found the old notebook from the antique shop. They read letters together, laughing at the stories of long ago. One letter mentioned a hidden note under the floorboard of a small desk. Sophie and Sarah looked at each other with wide eyes. "Should we try?" Sarah asked. They moved the desk and found a small envelope. Inside was a message. "Sisters who stay together can solve any mystery." They smiled. "That's us," Sophie said. The week continued with new experiences. Sarah interviewed a local musician for her class project. Sophie created a small program for her coding club. Sometimes people mixed them up, sometimes the surprises were small, but the sisters always supported each other. They learned that life was full of unexpected moments, funny, confusing, and sometimes magical. One night, the sisters walked home from a late study session. The streets were quiet, and the city lights reflected on the pavement. "Do you ever think about the future?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Sophie said. "I hope we can do something big, together or apart. I hope we always find adventures," Sarah said. They laughed, holding their notebooks and cameras, feeling that every day could bring a surprise. Even though people often confused them, Sophie and Sarah liked it in a way. It made life playful and interesting. And when they returned to their small apartment, they sat on the balcony, reading the old letters and dreaming about their next adventures. They knew that being twins was not only about looking alike, it was about sharing life, stories, and small mysteries together. As the city slept, they felt happy. Their lives were full of laughter, surprises, and tiny secrets. And every day reminded them that even small mix-ups and confusions could become wonderful memories. Part 4. Twists and Turns. It was late autumn, and Los Angeles was full of golden light. Sophie and Sarah were now very used to college life. They had friends, favorite places, and small routines. But even now, life continued to surprise them. One morning, Sarah received an invitation to a small city museum. "Sophie," she said, "you should come too. There is an old exhibition about our town." Sophie smiled. "Of course. Let's go." They walked together, talking about the busy week ahead. At the museum, they saw photographs, letters, and small objects from the past. One object caught their attention, a small, old key. A note under the key said, "For those who share everything, a small treasure waits." Sophie and Sarah looked at each other. "Do you think it is for us?" Sarah asked. "Maybe," Sophie said with excitement. They spent the day exploring the museum. Sometimes, people mistook them for each other. A man asked Sophie a question about Sarah's photography project. A child waved at Sarah and called her Sophie. The sisters laughed quietly. They were used to these small confusions, but they made life fun. After the museum, they decided to walk through a nearby park. The key felt heavy in Sarah's pocket. Suddenly, they noticed a small wooden box hidden under a bench. It looked old and dusty. Sophie opened it carefully. Inside, there was a small notebook, a photo, and a letter. The photo was black and white. It showed two sisters, smiling, holding hands in a similar way to Sophie and Sarah. The letter said, Twins who work together and laugh together can find treasures in every day. Share this with someone you love. The sisters were amazed. They felt that the message was for them. That evening, they returned home and read the notebook. It had small stories about sisters from the past, their adventures, and the funny mistakes they made. Some stories were very similar to their own lives. It is like someone wrote this for us, Sarah said. Sophie nodded. Yes, life is full of surprises, and being twins makes it more fun. The next day, they went to the campus cafe. As usual, some people confused them. Sophie was asked a question about Sarah's journalism project, and Sarah was asked about Sophie's coding app. The sisters laughed. This will never stop, Sarah said. Sophie nodded. And I think it is better this way. Life is more colorful. One afternoon, they went to the beach. The sun was warm, the waves were soft, and the city felt peaceful. They walked along the sand, collecting shells and telling stories. Remember our first week at college? Sarah asked. Sophie smiled. Yes. I almost laughed every day because of confusion with people. Sarah laughed. And now look at us. We still have surprises every day, but we are stronger together. In the evening, they returned to their apartment. They cooked dinner, shared stories, and placed the old notebook and photo on their shelf. This will remind us of adventures, mistakes, and happy surprises, Sophie said. And the small mysteries we solved together, Sarah added. Before going to bed, they sat on the balcony, looking at the city lights. The stars were bright, and the city was calm. Do you think life will always be like this? Sarah asked. Not always, Sophie said. Sometimes it will be hard, sometimes funny, sometimes confusing. But if we are together, we can face everything. Sarah smiled and held her sister's hand. Promise we will always stay close? Sophie nodded. Promise. As they watched the stars, they felt happy and safe. Life was full of surprises, small mysteries, laughter, and tiny confusions. Being twins made everything brighter and more interesting. And they knew that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other.